All right, so today we're jumping into Walter Isaacson's massive biography of Elon Musk. But look, this is way more than just a story about rockets and electric cars. We're going to unpack what the book says are the raw and often pretty brutal forces that created the most disruptive and, let's face it, controversial entrepreneur of our time.
Yeah, this book, it really doesn't pull any punches. Just look at the slide. It's not trying to get you to like the guy. What it promises is a completely raw, totally unfiltered look at the man behind the myth. We're talking the good, the bad, and the seriously uncomfortable.
So what's the big deal with this biography, right? Well, first off, the author is Walter Isaacson, the guy who wrote the definitive book on Steve Jobs. But for this one, he got something pretty incredible. Complete, total access to Musk's world. But what does that actually mean in practice?
It means Isaacson was basically Musk's shadow for 2 solid years. He talked to everybody, family, friends, even his enemies. But here's the most important part. Musk had zero control over the final book. He couldn't change a single word. So what you're getting is the real, unvarnished story. It's so authentic, in fact, that Musk himself went on X and confirmed some of the craziest stories in it. To really get him, though, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
To understand the man, you have to understand the boy. And his story starts in a really harsh, volatile place, apartheid-era South Africa. And look, this wasn't just some tough childhood. The book paints it as a crucible, a trial by fire that forged his obsessive, relentless drive. The book paints this picture of a lonely, really awkward kid who was just constantly targeted by bullies. After one beating that was so bad it put him in the hospital for a week, he comes home and his own father, Errol, actually sided with the attackers. This kind of constant violence, both physical and psychological, became the bedrock of his entire worldview. And you can see just how different this made him, even from his own brother, Kimball. While Kimball was social and outgoing, Elon was this intense loner. He just completely withdrew from the world and found his safe space in the predictable logic of books and computer code. So you can start to see how this brutal upbringing basically programmed his adult personality. To survive all that trauma, he built this emotional wall around himself. And the book argues that this wall didn't just dull his empathy for other people, it also supercharged his tolerance for risk and conflict. And those are the traits that would go on to define his entire career. So he gets out of South Africa, lands right in the middle of the dot-com boom in Silicon Valley, and he's ready to build his empire. But his first big successes, well, they came with a really painful lesson that he would never, ever forget. He starts not one, but 2 successful companies, Zip2 and then X.com, which would become PayPal. And in both cases, even though he was the visionary, he gets pushed out by his own board of directors. And the kicker? The absolute final insult? He gets fired as the CEO of PayPal while he's on his honeymoon? Can you even imagine? So getting kicked out of your own companies like that, well, it burned a lesson into his brain. A core principle. He made a vow to himself that he would never, ever again lose control of a company he founded. And that one simple rule would dictate every major business decision he made for the rest of his life. Okay, let's fast forward to 2002. Musk is 31 years old. After the PayPal sale, he is incredibly rich. He could have bought a private island and just retired. But that's not what he did. Not even close. He did something that, honestly, nobody saw coming. Just let that sink in for a second. He personally walked away with $250 million. For a 31-year-old, I mean, that's never work another day in your life money, right? And what does he do with it? He goes all in. He pushes almost all of his chips to the center of the table, pouring over 70% of his entire fortune into 3 ventures that pretty much everyone else thought were a joke. Just complete science fiction. A private rocket company called SpaceX, an electric car company called Tesla, and a solar power company, Solar City. So for the next few years, he's just burning through that cash, trying to will these insane ideas into existence. But then 2008 hits. The entire global financial system is imploding, and Musk's whole world was collapsing right along with it. Tesla was just hemorrhaging money. They couldn't build cars fast enough to stay afloat. But as bad as things were at Tesla, his other huge bet, SpaceX, was failing in a much more explosive way. His first try at launching the Falcon 1 rocket, boom, it ends in a fireball just seconds after liftoff. The second attempt gets a little further, but nope, it still fails to reach orbit. And then, in August 2008, the third rocket explodes too. And at this point, it's all gone. He's personally broke, both of his companies are on the verge of bankruptcy, and his marriage is ending. This is rock bottom. We're talking total, absolute ruin. But this is the moment that defines him. Right after that third rocket explodes, with everything in flames, he walks into the devastated SpaceX control room. No screaming, no finger-pointing. According to Isaacson, he just calmly looks at his shattered team and tells them they have just enough money and just enough parts for one last shot. And they have to be ready in 6 weeks. And you know what? It worked. Against every single odd, it worked. That one successful launch secured a life-saving $1.6 billion contract from NASA, and it pulled both SpaceX and Tesla back from the brink of death. It's just a moment that perfectly captures his character, right? An almost inhuman tolerance for risk, forged in that harsh childhood and now tested by fire.
So what you should really take away from all this is that very clear but very uncomfortable line Isaacson draws from childhood trauma straight to world-changing innovation. The book doesn't really give us an easy answer, but it forces us to ask a really difficult question. Is this relentless, often brutal drive the necessary price of genius, or is it just a warning?